Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott and I'm the Emperor of Stomaria. Today I want to go through the new application process that supporters of Stomaria have to go through in order to become citizens.
This is how nations are built and empires are forged. For every nation that becomes integrated into the empire, for every territory that we acquire, for every citizen that joins us, for every drop of water we collect, for every seed that we sow, for every watt of energy we produce, for every silver bar that we stamp, we are securing our future.
So as many of the people that follow, support and are citizens of Stomaria already, they will know that the application process as things stand was very straightforward, in the sense that all you had to do was go onto our Patreon campaign, pay the minimum threshold that we had advertised at the time, and you became a citizen of Stomaria. And this had a lot of pros, but it also had some drawbacks, some flaws, and I just want to discuss those quickly. So the application process, as I said, is very streamlined, very straightforward, and requires exceptionally little input from me or from anyone else. If you want to become a citizen of Stomaria, you simply had to go onto Patreon and pay their monthly contribution. And if you wanted to get more involved in Stomaria from that point onwards, then you had the option to do so. Now, this had the obvious benefit of having very little in the way of time or energy on my part to sift through who was and who was not becoming a citizen. People could just do it on their own accord and there wouldn't be any issues there. And it also meant that every citizen of Stomaria was guaranteed to be contributing something to the wider community, because there was an expectation for a minimum financial contribution on a monthly basis to renew their pledge of support for Stomaria. Now, the problem with this system is, as I say, it required very little involvement on my end, which means that I was not aware of who was becoming a Stomarian citizen. I was not aware of who was joining and representing us in a more formal capacity. People that could identify as Stomarian citizens are people that I might not want to identify as Stomarian citizens for whatever reason. And there were cases of individuals joining Stomaria, which I would have not normally have allowed to do so. If I had had the interview process, if I had gone through a formal application process, and I had the option to say yes or no, then I would have said no to a fair few of the applicants, the citizens that actually became citizens, simply because they could just do it through Patreon. And the other issue is that when it comes to family units, because you have to go through Patreon to become a citizen, It did mean that, for instance, a mother and a father, they could become citizens independently, and that wasn't an issue. But if they had children that wanted to identify as citizens of Stomaria, who were probably old enough to make that decision for themselves, but weren't old enough, for instance, to have a Patreon account, then obviously they wouldn't be able to become citizens. And so there was a division within the family household. And that's not something that's come up too often, but to give you a bit of context, I suppose, obviously myself and Empress Samantha are citizens of Stomaria, but so is Princess Eleanor, and she's 3. Now, she's not made the conscious effort to become a citizen of Stomaria, but she is obviously still a Stomarian citizen, not just a Stomarian citizen at that, she is the heir to the throne. So that we do have this issue where going through Patreon alone means that there is a lot of there's a lot of room for things to not be as neat and tidy as it could be, in the sense that if you wanted an entire family unit in the Empire of Stomaria or Stomaria itself, then that couldn't necessarily happen under this system. And finally, I think one of the issues that has always bugged me is as a nation, as an aspirant community, we are very big when it comes to personal liberty, individual liberty, natural rights. And a part of that is our belief in voluntary taxation. That is to say, we believe that the citizens of the nation should be able to contribute as much or as little as they wish to Stomaria, depending on their own financial circumstances. We would allow individuals to make that decision for themselves. We wouldn't have a flat tax, we wouldn't have a graded tax of any sort, we didn't have income tax, we didn't have VAT or anything like that. Not that much of that is enforceable in any shape or form anyway, but in principle, we believe in voluntary taxation, to be able to contribute as much or as little as you want. Now, we did have this to some degree through the Patreon campaign, because obviously people could contribute a lot more than the minimum threshold that we had in place. But the issue was that we did have a minimum threshold. And this was, as I say, because we want to ensure that all the citizens of Stomaria are always contributing to the wider community. They're adding value to Stomaria, to the nation. But this did somewhat fly in the face of one of our core fundamental objectives. And so what we've decided to do, having taken all of that into consideration, is that we are reverting back to an application process that we had when we were first founded. Ironically enough, this is all things that I considered very carefully when we first established Stomaria and the Empire of Stomaria. And this is something that we're having to fall back on, having gone through exactly the same kind of process that I thought we would end up going through, and ended up back to where we started, more or less, with some caveats. So, the original way that we recruited citizens, the original way that supporters became citizens, was through what we defined as an informal application process, which was nonetheless relatively exclusive, in the sense that it would be a case of me having a one-to-one meeting, either video call or face-to-face, and having a chat with the individual that was applying to become a Stomarian citizen. And during that conversation, I'd be able to get a feel for this individual. The person that was applying to become a Stomarian citizen, I wanted to know how much they knew about Stomaria. Why were they joining Stomaria over another nation? What are they hoping to get out of citizenship? What are they hoping to contribute to Stomaria as a citizen? And all of these sorts of questions, which would make me feel more confident about the person becoming a citizen of Stomaria. Now, this is obviously exceptionally time-consuming, in the sense that for every applicant that comes through, if I have to have a one-to-one meeting with them, then there is a longer application process. It's not a case of clicking a couple of buttons and you're in. It's not a case of filling in an online document or a form and you're in. You have to actually resonate with me personally. You have to be on the same wavelength as me. And this is a very deliberate process that we have to make sure that those that do join the Empire of Stomaria through Stomaria proper, they are on the same page as us. They understand what we are, who we are, what we're trying to do, and I understand from their own perspective what they're looking to get out of it. And in this way, we will hopefully build closer ties with one another. We will establish a genuine bridge between one another. And that sense of community will sort of resonate a lot more strongly. And I think it does speak volumes, as a side note, that when we had this application process in the past, when I did have to interview people one-on-one, every single citizen that I interviewed, and this was in 2020, so a full year after the Empire of Stomaria was founded, we then allowed people to apply for citizenship of Stomaria. So we waited a year before we allowed supporters to become citizens. And all of the applicants that I interviewed, the ones that went on to become citizens, are still citizens today. Whereas the citizens that joined through Patreon, they come and go exceptionally frequently. There's quite a high turnover. I say a high turnover. It's higher than the original process that we had. So all of the original citizens that Stomaria had, we still have those, and they are still on Patreon. So they just simply transitioned to Patreon when we changed the process, but they have stuck through us for quite literally at this point years. Whereas there are maybe half a dozen or more citizens that joined through Patreon that are no longer with us. And some of them, I never even knew who they were. And this obviously doesn't sit very right with me. And I just want to add a bit more community spirit, a bit more community feel to this whole thing. And you can't do that simply by having people join anonymously, which is effectively what they've done, or by filling in an application form. I need to see the individual. I need to speak to the individual. I want that sense of community. I want that sense of camaraderie. And if we can have more applications go through a one-to-one meeting in person, ideally at Southwood on Stomarian territory, that would be the ideal. And that's what I strive to do. But in lieu of that, we do obviously have one-to-one video call options. Now, regarding the Patreon campaign itself, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be keeping it up. And for those who do follow us, you might already notice that it's no longer, the title is no longer Citizen or Citizenship on our Patreon. It's Tier 1 through to Tier 10. And that is to allow supporters and citizens of Stomaria to contribute financially as much or as little as they want. But this is not a mandatory requirement. It's not the deciding factor in whether or not someone becomes a citizen or not. If you are contributing financially to Stomaria and then you apply to become a citizen of Stomaria, that will be a tick in your favour, because we can see you've got skin in the game. You're trying to support us in some way. It doesn't necessarily matter how much that contribution is, but I can see that you're making the effort. And that is the crux of the issue. I want to see that the applicant has thought about this. I've got no shortage of people that have come on, say, can I become a citizen of Stomaria? And I said, well, you can find out through our website. Have you visited yet? And they'll go, no, I haven't visited yet. And that just rings alarm bells all over the shop, because it shows me that you're not that interested. You're not that invested. And more to the point, you don't know who we are. You can't glean what Stomaria is purely by watching a single YouTube video or a couple of posts on Facebook. I need to know that the people who are becoming citizens of Stomaria actually know what we stand for. They are representatives on some level of our wider community. And it's very important to me that as many people as possible are as familiar as possible with what we're trying to do, what we stand for, and all the rest of it. And obviously the final point there is that now that it is going to be done without the necessity for mandatory financial contributions on a monthly basis, we have restored one of our core values, core objectives of voluntary taxation. And I think that is going to please a lot of our supporters, not least me, because it is something that has always played on my mind. It's trying to find that balance. It really is. And I think doing it this way, having the Patreon up for the time being, to allow our supporters and citizens to contribute as much or as little as they want financially, but nevertheless not making that the deciding factor on whether or not they become citizens in the first place, if indeed they want to apply for citizenship. So that was a brief rundown, if you like, as to what kind of system we had in the past, what kind of system we've used until recently, and the application process that we have now. So all you need to do, to reiterate and just to condense it a bit more, I suppose, if you want to become a citizen of Stomaria, all you have to do is go on our website, find out the contact details, and contact us through email, as it states on the website, and just say, I want to become a citizen of Stomaria, what's the application process? And then we'll send you a list of questions. If you answer those questions to some satisfactory degree, I will then initiate a one-to-one interview with you, and then that will decide whether or not you become a citizen. You might not want to take it any further, we might not want to take it any further, but at least we'll know, and we'll have that interaction. We'll know exactly where we stand, and we'll go on from there. And it's very, very straightforward. So with that in mind, if you did want to support Stomaria, then please feel free to give this video a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you in the next one.